We are back on MorningLine talking about the reporting of child abuse in the state of Tennessee. Dawn Harper, CEO of Nashville Children's Alliance, and Stephen Warner, Executive Director of Child Advocacy Centers of Tennessee, are with us this morning, taking your phone calls as well. I'm wondering, Dawn, in the circumstance, if this legislation were to pass, can you tell me the way you understand it, under what circumstance would a judge, I suppose, order that the name of the reporting individual be released, say, to the person who had reported it? How might that happen? Because we're saying, again, it doesn't happen automatically. It's not like going to be posted on a billboard somewhere. It's going to be at DCS. But ultimately, under what circumstance might the name be released?
Right. If it's okay, I'm going to refer to Stephen on this. He is our legislation guru and has really studied this.
Okay, go ahead,
so
Steve.
It's going to require a subpoena. It's going to require a subpoena of DCS. It's going to be most likely in a civil lawsuit. And so it's not going to happen in the investigation of the child abuse. After that comes back as unsubstantiated and the DA is chosen not to prosecute the alleged perpetrator, that person then is going to try to find out why somebody accused them of this. And then they're going to file a civil suit, which is going to end up with a subpoena. And they're going to subpoena everything they can find to figure out who went after them so that they can sue them. That's when this happens. This doesn't have anything to do with the investigation itself. And to one of the earlier points, DCS would love to have the information about who made the report so they can, first step, follow back up with more questions. The first thing they're going to do is call the person who made the report and find out. So DCS is not trying to encourage folks to make anonymous reports. They need to know so they can go back and follow up and just investigate. Removing one of the crucial pieces of their evidence. But in the light of a anonymous report, DCS is going to have to jump through the exact same hoops that the prosecutors and the attorneys are, which is trying to find out the facts. So it only happens with a subpoena in a civil suit on the back end after the whole case is closed.
Okay, and that's interesting. So it's after the whole case is closed, and sometimes if the case goes through, it's possible the accused could be found not guilty. That doesn't necessarily mean that the report was false. It means that maybe there wasn't evidence or a jury just decided not to find for this. And so my take is, I guess the circumstance, if I were the judge listening to this, if the case went to trial, there had to be some reasonable reason to have gone that far with it, and that ultimately was found not guilty. I mean, I have no problem with the accused suing the crap out of whoever filed that charge if they did it frivolously and falsely. Those people should be not only held accountable financially in civil court, but they should face criminal charges. I don't have a problem with that. The thing is, I just don't see that happening at that stage that late in the game, so I don't see why we need this bill. I mean, if it's actually going to trial eventually, that means DCS vetted it. There was enough evidence there. It wasn't false to begin with, but maybe there just wasn't enough evidence to convict. What do you think? Right or wrong, Steve?
So all of these circumstances are incredibly complicated. There were 3 families that came up and testified at the summer study session, and all of them had compelling cases where someone had made an anonymous report that just messed with their lives. In all 3 cases, the criminal case was unsubstantiated, but their children had been removed from the home for 6 months while they went through the process. So I don't make light of the headache or the heartache that these families are going through. The other argument, the other side of that coin, would be that this is the system that Tennessee has chosen to put into place to protect that child first and foremost. And every step along the way was taken with the interest of that child's health and safety. And so these are not cut and dry. There is no black and white on this. It is always gray. It is always muddy, particularly as you mentioned earlier in like city battles. Yeah. So it is, all right, why did the heartache of my child was taken away from me and put into foster care while they went through this process to make sure that my child was safe? That's sort of why I would sue.
Right.
Or why I would want to sue. It's a baby in the bathwater. Are there circumstances where this anonymous reporting barrier is abused? Probably, absolutely. Is it a majority or even a small minority of the cases? I would argue no. That overwhelmingly, this system is the only system we have in place to protect our most helpless residence.
And
weaken that will be a problem.
And I would think, though, too, I mean, I know none of us sitting here are lawyers, but unless it can be unequivocally proved that this was just a frivolous, baseless call just to mess with someone's life, short of that, I don't see how anyone wins in any civil court, especially if I'm on that darn jury, because there's a law that I've heard time and again, you err on the side of caution, that requires, if you truly believe, okay, truly believe, for right or wrong, but you truly believe there's some abuse going on, you are to report it. That should insulate me from any lawsuit, unless it can be proven that I had some other ulterior motive and literally made it all up. I don't see how anyone loses in court saying, hey, the law required me to do it. You can't sue my butt unless you can prove I made it all up. Right?
Yep. And the anecdotal stories of a pissed off nanny who managed to get fired for incompetence and now reports that the dad is abusing the child.
Right.
And that's not a made up story. That was one of the cases that was one of the families that came up and talked at the summer study hearing mentioned that kind of situation. Yes. Did that happen? Was that family dragged through mud? Yeah. Is that all of the cases? No. 1 in 10 children get abused. We know that, and it's probably higher than that. So 1 in 10 kids you see waiting for the bus has been abused at some point in their life. And so every system we can put into place, every tool we can put in the hands of those who are trying to protect those children, to me is an asset to reduce that. The unintended consequences, the long-term consequences for that child if they've been abused, of ending up abusing chemicals, alcohol, drugs, ending up in domestic violence situations themselves, ending up getting trafficked. All those consequences of abuse that we know long-term for the rest of their life that they're going to deal with cost our society, they cost our families, they cost our communities immense amounts of money. So in the interest of a couple of families who've had these alleged situations, we're trying to eliminate one of the key tools that allows folks to report that they believe someone's getting abused.
Let's take a call from Joe. Joe, good morning. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning to you.
Just a question and a comment. I know DCS is loaded up with cases. How long does it take from the time it's reported till they can get an investigation started? And the second part of my comment is, a lot of these cases are divorce cases where one parent or the other has custody, or they even have shared custody, and the other will turn it in as the person that's got the child is abusing it or whatever, trying to sway the case one way or the other. And in our society today, everybody has a take on what is child abuse. I know you touched on it earlier about spanking a child on the bottom, and some people believe that's child abuse. Some people believe that that's, just the way it should be to correct the child. So if they would comment on that a little bit.
All right, thank you. Yeah, good questions. The first basic one, I know neither of you are with DCS, but do you have a sense of how long it takes when a report is made before there can be some action in a case?
Sure. Joe, thank you so much for your questions and your call. So DCS have different tiers of when they go out and investigate. So different, if the child is at immediate risk, they're going to go out there very quickly. They have a certain time period. They have to go out to the home to lay their eyes on the child or children and make sure they're safe. And they're going to do a safety plan. They're going to ask questions, and they're going to make sure before they leave that home that child is safe. If something comes up and that child is not safe and that child is saying, I'm in danger, something has happened, DCS will likely find another placement, whether it be with a family member or another safety net until the entire until the child is safe again. And it could be until the investigation is over. If it depends on if if there's a report about alleged child sexual abuse, and maybe the alleged perpetrator, the child saw the alleged perpetrator at summer camp last year and has no intentions of going back to or to be around that alleged offender, that could delay the time that that DCS goes out to investigate. And it won't be delayed long, but they may put a 2 or a 3 day limit on when that DCS case manager has to lay eyes on the child. So it really depends on the situation, the severity, if the alleged abuser is currently around the child. As far as custody, we do see some of those cases. We do see where someone is upset with the spouse, and there has been times that those cases have been unsubstantiated as well. And so our team and teams across Tennessee really evaluate all the situations, all the evidence, all the interviews, and make the very best decision they can as far as moving forward with the investigation or unfounding the situation.
Joe, to your question about what constitutes abuse, that's actually very clearly written out in the law. And I'm not going to go on air talking about what constitutes sexual abuse, but it is very articulately laid out in the law what constitutes sexual abuse. Physical abuse is also very clearly laid out in the law. We're not operating in a gray area. Well, what is that or is that not? In order to prosecute, it's got to be laid out in law, and it is. And so the DA's office, the sheriff's office, the DCS staff, they know based on Tennessee code what constitutes abuse and what doesn't. One of the ones that gets really complicated is drug exposure, and that keeps getting amended. But DCS will pull kids if they believe that mom and dad, and can prove with the drug test that mom and dad are using in the home, or that child has been exposed to drugs. And it may not end up in a SIPP situation, but a lot of times these reports have more to do with, or often have to do with, drug exposure. Is a parent in the home using drugs? Is that child had drugs in their food or in some exposure? And it's primarily opioids, not necessarily marijuana, but a lot of the other drugs that we would be really concerned about. And so often those 100,000+ calls are dealing with drug exposure versus necessarily sexual abuse.
Gotcha. And you know what? I've got right here, and DCS spells it out pretty darn clearly, the different types of abuse. And it's not hard to figure out on some of this. I know there may be gray areas in terms of, deciding whether it is reaching the level of the abuse. But when we come back, I'll go over some of those real quick, from physical abuse to neglect to sexual abuse to psychological harm as well, when we come back and continue our conversation with our guests right after this.